Hello, I bring you my family conflict, which is called You Were Never Really Part of This Family. My cousin tried to erase me from the will, but the lawyer had a surprise in store. You know that feeling that your whole life was a lie? Well, that's exactly what I felt when my cousin Bradley looked straight into my eyes and said those words that echoed in my mind for weeks. But what he didn't know is that the family lawyer had a surprise in store that would change everything. And when I say everything, I mean literally everything. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people we least expect can surprise us in the most extraordinary ways. But before I get to the part when my life turned upside down, I need to tell you how it all began. The Whitmore mansion has always been imposing. Located in Greenwich, Connecticut, it stood majestically at the end of a lane lined with century-old oak trees. It was the kind of place you see in movies about wealthy American families, with its red brick, arched windows, and a garden that looked like something out of a home decor magazine. I grew up playing in those hallways, running down the marble staircases and hiding in the library that smelled of leather and history. Grandpa Harold Whitmore was the patriarch of the family, a man who built a financial empire from scratch. He was tough, demanding, but he always had a special affection for me. Or so I thought. My mother, Elizabeth, was his youngest daughter, and I was always treated like a true granddaughter, or at least I thought I was. I grew up hearing stories about how Grandpa Harold came to the United States as a young man, worked tirelessly, and built Whitmore Holdings, a company that became synonymous with investment success. He used to tell me these stories when I was little, sitting on the porch of the main house while he smoked his Cuban cigar and I drank hot chocolate made by the housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson. "Sarah, my dear," he would say, "money isn't everything in life, but family is, and you'll always be my family, no matter what." Those words echoed in my mind as I grew up, attending the best private school in the area and then graduating from Harvard. Grandpa Harold paid for everything, always with a proud smile on his face. He said that investing in his family's education was the best deal he had ever made. But not everything was rosy in the Whitmore family. My cousin Bradley, Uncle Jonathan's son, always looked at me with an expression I could never quite decipher. It wasn't hate, it wasn't love, it was somewhere in between, a kind of forced tolerance, as if my presence was something he had to accept, but not necessarily like. Bradley was 3 years older than me and had always been the golden boy of the family. A graduate of Yale in economics, he had worked at his grandfather's company from a young age, rising quickly through the ranks. He was handsome, intelligent, ambitious, and knew exactly how to earn Grandpa Harold's trust. While I was pursuing my career as a lawyer at a New York firm, Bradley was cementing his position as the heir apparent to the family business. During Sunday lunches at the mansion, which were a sacred tradition in the Whitmore family, Bradley often spoke about the business with a propriety that made me uncomfortable. He referred to the company as our company, the family money as our money, as if it were all rightfully his. And maybe it was. Grandpa Harold died on a rainy day in October. I was in my Manhattan office reviewing a contract when I got the call from my mother. She was in tears, almost incomprehensible, repeating that he had suffered a heart attack while working in his home office. At 82, Grandpa Harold left the same way he lived, working. The funeral was a grand affair, as was the Whitmore family's life. Hundreds of people attended, from local politicians to Wall Street tycoons. I was there, dressed in black, holding my mother's hand as she wept silently. Bradley was on the other side, comforting his father, Uncle Jonathan, who seemed to have aged 10 years in a week. It was during the reception after the funeral that everything began to change. People came up to me to greet me, to offer their condolences, to talk about how proud Grandpa Harold had spoken of me. But I noticed something different about Bradley's demeanor. He was watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable, as if he were evaluating something. "Sarah," he approached me when we were more alone, "we need to talk about the will." "The will?" I asked, surprised. "I don't think this is the right time, Bradley." "Unfortunately, there's never a right time for this kind of conversation, but I need you to know that some things are going to change." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was grieving, tired, and Bradley had always been a bit of a drama queen. I thought he was just processing his grandfather's death differently. How wrong I was. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following week at the office of Mr. Thompson, the family's attorney for more than 30 years. He was a short, gray-haired man with gold-rimmed glasses who always reminded me of a college professor. He had that gentle, measured way of speaking that exuded confidence. I arrived at his office on Park Avenue on a sunny Thursday. Autumn was painting the trees gold and red, and New York was in that poetic mood that the city sometimes assumes. But I was nervous, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the awkward conversation with Bradley, or maybe it was just the reality that Grandpa Harold really was no longer with us. The conference room in Mr. Thompson's office was elegant and traditional, with a huge mahogany desk and portraits of prominent lawyers on the walls. When I walked in, Bradley was already there, sitting next to his father. They were talking quietly, then stopped when they saw me. "Sarah, dear," Uncle Jonathan stood to greet me. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, Uncle Jonathan. How about you?" "Trying to process all this," he replied, and I could tell he meant it. His eyes were red, probably from crying. My mother arrived a few minutes later, accompanied by my Aunt Margaret, Uncle Jonathan's wife. We greeted everyone, and the mood was solemn, as expected. Mr. Thompson walked in next, carrying a heavy-looking leather briefcase. "Good morning, everyone," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I know this is a difficult time for the family, but Harold left very specific instructions about how he wanted the will to be handled." He opened the briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. The seal bore the Whitmore family crest, something Grandpa Harold had created years ago as a sort of family tradition. "Before we get to the main points," Mr. Thompson continued, "Harold has asked me to read a letter he wrote to all of you." He carefully opened the envelope and unfolded a sheet of paper in Grandpa Harold's handwriting. I recognized the elegant, ancient script immediately. "My dear family," Mr. Thompson began to read, "if you are reading this letter, it means that I have finally left to find my beloved Margaret." He was referring to Grandma, who had died 10 years earlier. "I want you to know that each of you has been a blessing in my life, each in your own way." Mr. Thompson's voice was soft, but thick with emotion. I could feel my mother shifting in the chair next to me, probably trying to hold back tears. "Jonathan, my son, you have always been the sensible one in the family. Your dedication to business and your integrity have made me proud. Margaret, you have brought joy to our family and have cared for Jonathan with such love. Elizabeth, my youngest, you have always been my brave little girl, following your own path even when I did not understand your choices." I looked at my mother and saw a tear running down her face. She had been an artist in her youth, something Grandpa Harold had never fully supported, preferring that she marry and raise a family in the traditional way. "Bradley, my grandson, you have the entrepreneurial spirit that runs in the family. I hope you will use that gift to make a difference in the world. And Sarah." Mr. Thompson paused, and I felt all eyes turn to me. My heart raced. "Sarah, my dear granddaughter, you have always been special to me. Your intelligence, determination, and generous heart reminded me so much of your grandmother. I hope you know how much it meant to me to have you in my life." I felt tears well up in my eyes. Even in death, Grandpa Harold could touch my heart with his loving words. Now, about the provisions of my will, Mr. Thompson continued reading. "I want you to know that I have thought carefully about each decision. I hope you understand that love is not measured in dollars, but sometimes we need to use dollars to show our love." Mr. Thompson folded the letter and set it aside. Then he picked up a more formal official document. "Now, for the main provisions," he said, adjusting his glasses again. "To Margaret Whitmore, I leave the sum of $500,000 and the jewelry that belonged to my late wife." Aunt Margaret sighed in relief. It was a generous amount, enough to ensure her financial security. "To Elizabeth Whitmore, I leave the sum of $1 million and the cottage on Cape Cod." My mother was visibly surprised. The cottage on Cape Cod was a retreat that Grandpa Harold had loved, and $1 million was much more than she had expected. "To Jonathan Whitmore, I leave the sum of $2 million and a 15% interest in Whitmore Holdings." Uncle Jonathan nodded solemnly. It was a substantial inheritance, and the stake in the company would ensure that he would have a say in the family business. "To Bradley Whitmore," Mr. Thompson continued, "I leave the sum of $5 million and a 40% interest in Whitmore Holdings, as well as the position of CEO of the company." Bradley smiled for the first time since we had arrived. It was exactly what he had expected, and honestly, what we all had expected. He had worked hard for this position. "And to Sarah Whitmore," Mr. Thompson paused, "I leave—" I held my breath, expecting to hear some modest sum, and perhaps some object of sentimental value. "To Sarah Whitmore, I leave the sum of $3 million, the main mansion in Greenwich, and a 40% interest in Whitmore Holdings." The silence that followed was deafening. I was completely shocked. 40%? That meant Bradley and I would have equal shares in the company. The main mansion? That house was worth millions. "This must be a mistake," Bradley said, his voice tight. "There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," Mr. Thompson replied calmly. "Harold was very specific about these provisions." "But that doesn't make sense," Bradley insisted, rising from his chair. "Sarah doesn't even work at the company. Why would she get an equal share of the company?" "Because that's what Harold wanted," Mr. Thompson replied firmly. I was still in shock, trying to process what I had just heard. Grandpa Harold had left me a fortune and a responsibility I had never expected. "There's more," Mr. Thompson continued, ignoring Bradley's agitation. "Harold also left specific instructions on how the company is to be run. Bradley will be the CEO, but any major decisions must be approved by both majority shareholders." "Both majority shareholders?" Bradley asked, his face turning red. "Yes, you and Sarah. Together, you own 80% of the company. You'll need to work together." Bradley looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't just surprise or disappointment. It was something deeper, darker. "Mr. Thompson," he said, trying to maintain his composure, "I would like to request a full audit of this will. I need to make sure everything is in order." "Of course, Bradley, that is your right. But I can assure you that the will is completely valid and legal. Harold has worked with me personally on the provisions for the past 2 years." 2 years? My mother asked, surprised. Yes, Harold was very meticulous. He revised and amended the will several times, each time with great care and thought. After the reading of the will, we all left the office in an awkward silence. Bradley didn't even look at me as he said goodbye. Uncle Jonathan looked confused, and my mother was clearly trying to process everything. "Sarah," my mother said when we were alone in the taxi, "do you have any idea why Dad did this?" "I have no idea, Mother. I'm as surprised as you are. He never mentioned anything about leaving the company to you." "Never. I always assumed Bradley would inherit everything related to the business." My mother was silent for a moment, staring out the taxi window as we drove through Central Park. "Dad was always a very observant man. He didn't do anything without a very good reason." Over the next few days, I tried to go about my normal routine, but it was impossible. News of the inheritance had spread quickly through my family and social circles. I received calls from distant cousins I hadn't seen in years, all wanting to know about the will. But the call that stuck with me the most was from Bradley. He invited me to dinner at a fancy restaurant in Midtown, saying we needed to discuss the future of the company. I accepted, hoping we can find a way to work together. The restaurant was one of those places where New York's elite gathered to do business. White cloth tables, impeccable waiters, and a wine list that cost more than most people make in a month. Bradley was already there when I arrived, wearing an impeccable suit and a serious expression. "Sarah," he stood to greet me, "thanks for coming." "Sure, Bradley. We really need to talk about all this." We ordered drinks and sat in silence for a few moments. I could feel the tension in the air, as if Bradley was bracing himself for something. "Sarah," he finally said, "I want you to know that I respect Grandpa Harold's decision very much, but I also want you to be realistic about the situation." "Realistic how?" "You have no experience running a company this size. Whitmore Holdings has thousands of employees, important clients, enormous responsibilities. It's a whole different world than corporate law." He wasn't wrong. I had a background in corporate law, but I had never run a company. "I understand your concerns, Bradley, but maybe that's exactly why Grandpa Harold wanted us to work together. You have the operational experience. I have the legal experience." "Maybe," he said, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. "But we also need to be practical. I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "I'll buy your share of the company. I can offer you $15 million, which is more than the market value of your share. You get to keep the money, the mansion, and you can continue your law career without worrying about the family business." $15 million was an astronomical amount of money. I had never imagined having that much money in my life. But something about the proposal bothered me. "Why are you so eager to buy me, Bradley? If Grandpa Harold wanted us to work together, maybe we should at least try." "Sarah," he sighed, "you're so naive. The business world is cruel. It's no place for people who aren't born to do it." "And who decides who's born to do it and who isn't?" "Experience, tradition, blood." The word blood made me shiver. There was something about the way he said it that made me uncomfortable. "What do you mean by that?" Bradley took a sip of his whiskey and looked me straight in the eye. "Sarah, you're a wonderful person, always have been, but you have to understand that some things in life are a matter of true inheritance, not just legal inheritance." "I don't understand." "I'm saying that maybe Grandpa Harold made a mistake. Maybe he was influenced by feelings that clouded his business judgment." I felt anger rising inside me. Bradley was questioning Grandpa Harold's mental competence, something I would never do. "Bradley, Grandpa Harold was one of the smartest men I've ever known. He made no mistakes in his will." "Maybe not, but maybe he didn't take all the variables into account. What variables? Bradley hesitated for a moment, as if deciding whether to continue. Sarah, what do you know about our family history? I know the story. Grandpa Harold came to America as a young man, worked hard, built the company. Not that story. The real story. The story about how you came into our family. My heart started beating faster. There was something in Bradley's voice that frightened me. What are you talking about? Haven't you ever wondered why you don't look like any of us? Why doesn't your mother ever talk about your father? I had always wondered about that. My mother had always been evasive about my father, saying only that he had died when I was a baby. And it was true that I didn't look like any of the Whitmores. My mother told me my father died when I was little. Your mother lied to you, Sarah. Or at least she left out a very important part of the truth. I felt the ground give way beneath my feet. What do you mean? You were adopted, Sarah. Your mother couldn't have children and adopted you when you were 3. You're not a Whitmore by blood. The restaurant began to spin around me. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Adopted? How was that possible? Why hadn't anyone ever told me? That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. You're lying. I'm not lying, Sarah. Ask your mother. Ask Uncle Jonathan. Everyone knows except you. Tears began to stream down my face. I felt completely lost, betrayed, confused. Even if that's true, I said, trying to keep my composure, it doesn't change anything. Grandpa Harold raised me as his granddaughter. He left me the inheritance because he wanted to, or because he was deceived, or because he felt obligated by years of lies. Lies? Your mother never told him you were adopted. She let him believe you were his biological granddaughter. I was completely devastated. If this were true, it meant my entire life had been built on a lie. Still, I said, trying to find strength, legally, I am an heir. The will is valid. Legally, yes. But morally, ethically, do you really think you deserve an inheritance based on lies? I stood up from the table, shaking with anger and pain. I'm not going to listen to this anymore, Bradley. Sarah, wait, he said, standing up as well. I don't want to hurt you. I want to help you. Take my offer, $15 million. You can start your life over without carrying the burden of an inheritance that isn't truly yours. Go to hell, Bradley. I left the restaurant and caught the first taxi I saw. I cried all the way home, feeling like my world had completely fallen apart. When I got to my apartment, I immediately called my mother. Mom, I need to talk to you, now. Sarah, honey, what happened? You seem upset. Mom, was I adopted? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Sarah, answer me, Mom. Was I adopted? Yes, she whispered. You were. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I wanted you to feel like you were part of the family. Because you were my daughter, no matter how you came to me. But Dad knew? Grandpa Harold knew? Yes, your grandfather knew. He loved you like a real granddaughter from day one. Then why is Bradley saying Grandpa Harold was deceived? Bradley said that? That boy was always jealous of you. Jealous? Sarah, you have to understand something. Your Grandpa Harold chose you. He knew you were adopted and he loved you anyway. In fact, he said you were even more special because you were chosen to be part of our family. But then why is Bradley trying to make me believe that the inheritance is illegitimate? Because he expected to inherit everything and he can't accept that Grandpa chose to share the company with you. Mom, I don't know what to do. I'm completely lost. Come home, honey. Let's talk in person. The next day, I drove to my mother's house in Westchester. It was a smaller house than the Whitmore mansion, but cozy and full of memories. When I arrived, my mother was waiting on the porch with that gentle smile that always calmed me. Sarah, she hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Mom, tell me everything, the whole truth. We sat in the living room and my mother began to tell a story I had never heard. I always wanted children, but I had medical problems that made it impossible. After years of trying, your father, yes, you had a father who loved me very much, and I decided to adopt. We went to an agency in Boston and found you. You were 3 years old? Yes. Your biological parents had died in a car accident and you had been in the system for a few months. When I first saw you, I knew immediately that you were my daughter. And Dad? Your father adored you. He died when you were 5 from cancer. You were too young to fully understand, but he loved you as if you were his own biological daughter. And Grandpa Harold? When I took you to meet the family, Dad fell in love with you instantly. He said you had your grandmother's curious eyes and that you were destined to be a Whitmore. But Bradley said Grandpa Harold was tricked. Bradley's lying, Sarah. Your grandfather always knew you were adopted. In fact, he said it made you even more special because you were chosen to be part of our family. I felt a huge sense of relief, but also a growing anger toward Bradley. Why is Bradley doing this? Because he expected to inherit everything, and he can't accept that Grandpa chose to share the company with you. What should I do, Mom? Do what your heart tells you. But remember, your grandfather chose you for a reason. He saw something in you that maybe you don't even see. I spent the weekend at my mom's house trying to process everything that had happened. On Sunday, I decided I had to see the Whitmore mansion. Technically, it was mine now, but I still couldn't believe it. I drove to Greenwich and parked in front of the mansion. It was exactly as I remembered it, grand, elegant, full of history. I used the key Mr. Thompson had given me and let myself in. The interior was preserved exactly as Grandpa Harold had left it. His office still smelled of cigars and leather. His pens were neatly arranged on the desk, his books lined up on the shelves. It was as if he would appear at any moment. I sat in his chair, behind the desk where he had made so many important decisions. There was a locked drawer, and I found the key in the pen holder. Inside the drawer, I found something that would change everything. There was a letter addressed to me, with my name written in Grandpa Harold's elegant handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. My dear Sarah, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means that you have already discovered the truth about Bradley and are probably wondering about your inheritance. I want you to know that every decision I have made has been carefully thought out. I continued reading, my heart beating rapidly. You are not my biological granddaughter, but you are my granddaughter by heart. I chose you to share the company with me because I saw in you qualities that are essential to a true leader: integrity, compassion, and the ability to do what is right even when it is difficult. Bradley is an excellent executive, but he has one fatal flaw. He believes that success justifies any means. I have discovered in recent years that he has been doing questionable business, using methods that go against everything I have built. My heart raced. Had Grandpa Harold discovered something about Bradley? There are documents in my safe that show that Bradley has been diverting company money to risky personal investments. He has also made deals with companies that we know are involved in illegal practices. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Bradley wasn't just greedy, he was corrupt. I left you as a co-heir because I trust you to do what is right. Use your legal expertise to investigate Bradley's activities. Protect the company and our employees. The combination to the safe is your birth date. You will find everything you need there. The letter ended with, "Remember, Sarah, family is not defined by blood, but by love and loyalty. You will always be my granddaughter, and I hope you will be the one to carry on the true Whitmore legacy." I sat in that chair for hours, trying to process everything I had read. Not only did Grandpa Harold know about my adoption, he had specifically chosen me to protect Bradley's company. I found the safe behind a picture on the wall. I typed in my birth date, and it opened, revealing stacks of documents. I spent the entire night reading and analyzing them. It was worse than I had imagined. Bradley had embezzled more than $2 million from the company over the past 3 years. There were bank statements, fraudulent contracts, compromising emails, all meticulously documented by Grandpa Harold and his private investigators. But what shocked me the most was discovering that Bradley had tried to sell inside information about the company to competitors. There were records of phone conversations, suspicious bank transfers, and even photos of Bradley meeting with executives from rival companies. Now I understood why Grandpa Harold had structured the inheritance the way he had. He wasn't just giving me an opportunity, he was giving me a mission. On Monday morning, I called Mr. Thompson and set up an urgent meeting. I brought all the documents I had found and showed them to him. "My God," he said, adjusting his glasses as he looked over the papers. "Harold suspected it, but he's never shown me such conclusive evidence." "Mr. Thompson, what should I do with this?" "Well, legally, you have several options. You can sue Bradley for fraud, you can report him to the authorities, or you can try to resolve this internally." "And which do you recommend?" "That depends on what you want to achieve. If you want legal justice, we sue. If you want to protect the company and the family, perhaps a more discreet approach is better." I thought for a moment. Grandpa Harold had left me with this responsibility, but he had also given me the wisdom to handle it. "I want to schedule a meeting with Bradley, but this time with you present." "Sure, I'll officially call you as the company's legal representative." The meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday in Mr. Thompson's office. When Bradley arrived, he seemed confident, almost arrogant. He probably thought I had accepted his offer to buy. "Sarah," he said, smiling, "I hope you've thought about my proposal." "Yes, I have, Bradley. But first, I need to show you a few things." I began to spread the documents out on the table. I watched Bradley's smile gradually fade, replaced by a look of panic. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Grandpa Harold got it all organized for me. He knew exactly what you were doing." "Sarah, I can explain." "Explain what? How did you steal $2 million from the company? How did you sell confidential information? How did you destroy the trust Grandpa Harold placed in you?" Bradley rose from his chair, agitated. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The company was struggling and I had to make quick decisions." "Quick decisions?" I interrupted. "You call using company money to buy an apartment in Manhattan a quick decision? Using corporate funds to pay off your gambling debts?" "How do you know that?" "Because Grandpa Harold hired private investigators. He knew about your debts, your gambling addiction, everything." Mr. Thompson spoke for the first time. "Bradley, These are very serious allegations. We have enough evidence to prosecute." "You can't prove anything," Bradley said, but his voice was unconvincing. "I can prove everything," I said, picking up a specific folder, "including the fact that you tried to bribe company officials to alter financial reports." Bradley sat down heavily, putting his head in his hands. "What do you want?" "First, you're going to return all the money you stole from the company. Second, you're going to resign as CEO. Third, you're going to sell your stake in the company to me for face value." "That's blackmail." "No, Bradley, that's justice. The alternative is that I'll report everything to the feds and you'll spend the next 10 years in prison." "You wouldn't do that. We're family." It was at that moment that I remembered the cruel words Bradley had said in the restaurant, and I felt a strength I hadn't known I had. "You're right, Bradley. We are family. And that's exactly why Grandpa Harold gave me this responsibility, because he knew I would do whatever it took to protect the real family. And if I refuse, then you'll find out that I've learned a lot more about business than you realize, and that I'm not afraid to fight for what's right." Bradley was silent for a few minutes, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. "How long do I have?" 2 weeks to return the money and sign the papers transferring the stake, 1 month to officially step down as CEO. "And then what?" "Then you'll disappear from my life and never try to blackmail or manipulate anyone in this family again." "Fine," he said, defeated. "I'll do what you want." After Bradley left, Mr. Thompson looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Sarah, you are brilliant. Harold would be very proud." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. But it's not over yet." "What do you mean?" "I want you to prepare all the documents so that I can officially take over as CEO of Whitmore Holdings. And I want you to call a meeting of all senior employees for next week." "Are you sure? Running a company this size is a huge responsibility." "I'm sure. Grandpa Harold prepared me for this, even if I didn't know it at the time." 2 weeks later, Bradley had fulfilled all the agreements. The money was returned, his share was transferred to me, and he stepped down as CEO. I now controlled 85% of Whitmore Holdings. My first decision as CEO was to call a meeting of all employees. I wanted everyone to know that despite the changes in leadership, the company's values would remain the same. "My name is Sarah Whitmore." I began my speech in the main conference room, and I know many of you are wondering what to expect from the new leadership. I looked around at the faces around me. Some looked curious, others worried, but everyone was paying attention. I want you to know that my grandfather, Harold Whitmore, built this company on principles of integrity, excellence, and respect. Those principles will not change. I also want you to know that while I am new to the CEO role, I am not new to business. I have a background in corporate law, and most importantly, I was raised on the best values that this family represents. In the coming months, we will implement new transparency policies. We will create an ethics committee, and we will ensure that every employee of Whitmore Holdings is treated with the respect they deserve. The applause was genuine and warm. I felt like I was on the right track. Over the next few months, I worked tirelessly to understand every aspect of the business. I hired outside consultants to audit all operations, implemented new compliance policies, and restructured several departments. I discovered that Bradley had caused more damage than I had imagined. In addition to the money he had stolen, he had made several risky investments that had left the company in a precarious financial position. I had to sell some assets and renegotiate contracts, but I managed to stabilize the situation. 6 months after I took over, Whitmore Holdings was stronger than ever. Our profits had increased by 20% and employee morale was excellent. That's when Bradley came into my life again. He called my office on a Thursday afternoon asking for a meeting. I didn't want to see him, but my curiosity got the better of me. "Sarah," he said when he walked into my office, "congratulations on the company's success." "Thank you, Bradley. What do you want?" "I want to apologize, and I want you to know that I recognize that I was wrong about you." "Do you think an apology will erase everything you've done?" "No, I know it won't, but I want you to know that I've learned from my mistakes and that I admire what you've been able to do with the company." "Bradley, you tried to steal from me. You tried to humiliate me. You tried to make me believe that I didn't deserve my inheritance." "I know, and I deeply regret it. I was jealous, I was desperate, I was wrong about everything." "Why did you come here?" "Because I want a second chance. Not in the company, I know that's impossible, but in the family. I want us to be cousins again, even if I don't deserve it." I stared at Bradley for a long moment. He looked genuinely remorseful, more humble than I'd ever seen him. "Bradley, you said that I was never really part of this family. Those words hurt me deeply." "I know, and you were completely wrong. You're more Whitmore than I ever was." "Why?" "Because you did the right thing even when it was hard. Because you protected the company and the employees. Because you honored Grandpa Harold's legacy in a way I never could." I felt a strange emotion. Part of me wanted to forgive him, but another part of me was still hurt. "Bradley, I need time to process all of this." "I understand. I just want you to know that I'm here if you ever decide to give me a second chance." After he left, I thought about forgiveness and family. Grandpa Harold always said that family was about love and loyalty, not blood. Maybe that applied to forgiveness, too. 3 months later, I invited Bradley to our family Christmas dinner. He was surprised, but he accepted. During dinner, he was respectful and humble, a far cry from the arrogant man I knew. "Sarah," my mother said to me after dinner, "thank you for giving Bradley a second chance. Your grandfather would be proud." Grandpa Harold believed in the power of redemption. I think he would have wanted me to give you that opportunity. You have become an extraordinary leader, not just in business, but in life. I learned from the best teacher. A year after I took over the company, I hosted a party to celebrate Whitmore Holdings' centennial. It was a grand affair, attended by hundreds of guests, including customers, employees, and family members. During my speech, I spoke about Grandpa Harold's legacy and how he had built the company on strong values. I told the audience that my grandfather used to say that true success is not measured by profits alone, but by the positive impact we make on people's lives. Today, Whitmore Holdings employs over 5,000 people and continues to grow because we remain true to those values. After the event, Mr. Thompson approached me. "Sarah, I have something for you." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Harold asked me to give this to you when the company completes 1 year under your leadership." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an old photo of Grandpa Harold and me when I was a child, playing in the mansion's garden. On the back he had written, "To my beloved granddaughter, who always knew that family is about choices, not blood." Tears filled my eyes. Even after he was gone, Grandpa Harold continued to guide and love me. 2 years later, Whitmore Holdings had become one of the most respected companies in the country. We had implemented social responsibility programs, created scholarships for underprivileged youth, and become a benchmark for ethical business practices. Bradley, meanwhile, had rebuilt his life. He had started a small consulting firm and was working to pay off his debts and restore his reputation. We still had a distant but respectful relationship. One afternoon, while I was working in my office in the Greenwich Mansion, I had converted part of the house into a company office. I received an unexpected call. Sarah Whitmore? The voice on the other end of the line was that of an elderly woman. Yes, it's me. My name is Dorothy Miller. I was a social worker at the agency where you were adopted. My heart raced. Mrs. Miller, why are you calling? Because I received a very interesting letter. A letter from someone who claims to be your biological sister. I almost dropped the phone. My sister? Yes, dear. It seems that you were not the only survivor of the accident that killed your parents. Your younger sister, who was only 1 year old at the time, also survived. She was adopted by a different family. She wants to meet me? Yes, very much. She told me that she spent years looking for you. May I give her your number? Yes, please. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Sarah? The voice was young, nervous. My name is Amy Peterson. I'm your sister. We talked for hours. Amy told me that she had grown up in a loving family in Oregon, that she had graduated from medical school, and that she had always known she had an older sister somewhere. She had spent years searching for me and had finally tracked down the adoption agency. Sarah, she said one night as we ate dinner at the mansion, you've built an extraordinary life. Our birth parents would be so proud. Our birth parents, I repeated, savoring the words. Tell me about them. Amy pulled a photo from her purse. I got this from the agency's archives. This is Michael and Linda Thompson, our parents. I looked at the photo of a young, smiling couple. It was strange to see the faces of the people who had given me life, but whom I had never met. They look happy, I said. According to the records, they were. Young, in love, eager to start a family. The accident was a terrible tragedy, but at least we survived. Amy, do you want to stay here in New York? I would love to, but I have my life in Oregon. I'm a doctor at a public hospital, and I have patients who depend on me. What if I offered you a position at the company? We could create an occupational health department. Amy smiled. Sarah, you don't have to give me a job. You've already given me the most precious gift, my sister back. It's not charity, Amy. It's family, and family takes care of each other. Amy stayed for another 2 weeks, and during that time, she got to know the entire family. My mother immediately adopted her, saying that she now had 2 daughters. Even Bradley was kind to her, perhaps finally understanding the true meaning of family. Before Amy left, I threw a small party at the mansion. All the family members were there, including Bradley, who had behaved perfectly since our conversation about forgiveness. I want to make a toast, I said, raising my champagne glass, to family. Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose. To Grandpa Harold, who taught me that love is about choices. To my mother, who chose me to be her daughter. To Amy, who gave me back a part of myself I didn't even know was lost. And to Bradley, I continued, looking at my cousin, who taught me that sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. Bradley raised his glass, tears in his eyes. To Sarah, who taught me that family is about forgiveness and second chances. 6 months later, Amy decided to take me up on my offer. She moved to New York and took over the new occupational health department at Whitmore Holdings. We bought a house next to the mansion, and I finally had the family I'd always dreamed of having. The company continued to thrive. We became one of the most admired companies in the country, known not only for our financial results, but for our corporate culture and social responsibility. Bradley, for his part, had made a full recovery. His consulting firm was booming, and he had become a champion of business ethics. He even occasionally collaborated on projects for Whitmore Holdings. 3 years to the day after I inherited the company, I was sitting in Grandpa Harold's office, now my office, reviewing the quarterly reports. The company had grown 40% since I took over, and we had ambitious plans for the future. Amy walked into the office carrying 2 cups of coffee. "What are the numbers?" "Excellent. Grandpa Harold would be proud." "You talk about him as if he were still here." "In a way, he is. His lessons, his values, his wisdom, all of that lives on through the company and the family he built." "Sarah, can I ask you a question?" "Sure." "Do you ever regret not taking Bradley's offer? $15 million is a lot of money." I laughed. "Amy, $15 million wouldn't buy what I have now. I have a company that makes a difference in people's lives. I have a family that loves me. I have a sister I thought I had lost forever. I have a purpose." "And Bradley?" "Bradley has learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters. He is better off now than he has ever been." "Have you forgiven him completely?" "Yes. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or accepting bad behavior. It means choosing not to let anger and resentment control your life." Amy smiled. "Do you know that you are an extraordinary leader, not just in business, but in life?" "I learned from the greatest teacher," I replied, looking at Grandpa Harold's portrait on the wall. That night, I hosted a special dinner at the mansion. I invited the entire family, including Bradley, to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of my inauguration as CEO. "I want to tell you a story," I said over dinner. 3 years ago, my cousin Bradley told me that I was never truly part of this family. At the time, those words hurt me deeply. Bradley looked uncomfortable, but I continued. "Today, I understand that Bradley was wrong, but not in the way you might think. He was wrong because family isn't about belonging. It's about choosing to belong. Grandpa Harold chose me. My mother chose me. I chose all of you. And most importantly, I chose to forgive. I chose to believe that people can change. I chose to build instead of tear down." I raised my glass. "To the Whitmore family, not defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and choices. To Grandpa Harold, who taught us that true heritage is not in what we get, but in what we do with what we get." 5 years later, Whitmore Holdings had become one of the most respected companies in the world. We had offices in 10 countries, employed over 20,000 people, and were a model for ethical business practices. Bradley, for his part, had made a full recovery. His consulting firm was booming, and he had become a champion of business ethics. He even occasionally collaborated on projects for Whitmore Holdings. One spring afternoon, as I walked through the mansion's gardens, I thought about how my life had changed. I had gone from being an ordinary lawyer in Manhattan to becoming the CEO of a multinational corporation. I had discovered that I was adopted and found my biological sister. I had lost and regained the trust in my family. But the most important lesson I learned was that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who need forgiveness the most. Bradley had tried to destroy me, but by forgiving him, I had become a better person. I sat on the bench where I used to talk to Grandpa Harold as a child. I could almost hear his voice saying, "Sarah, my dear, money isn't everything in life, but family is. And you will always be my family, no matter what." He was right. Family wasn't about blood or legal inheritance. It was about choices, about love, about forgiveness, and about building something bigger than ourselves. Today, when young entrepreneurs ask me about the secret to success, I always say the same thing. Success isn't about what you earn, but about what you build. It's not about power, but about purpose. And it's not about defeating your enemies, but about turning them into allies. Whitmore Holdings continued to grow, but always maintained the values Grandpa Harold had established. We created financial education programs for underserved communities, invested in sustainable technologies, and maintained a corporate culture based on respect and integrity. Bradley, in turn, had become one of my most trusted advisors. His experience with failure and redemption had shaped him into a wiser and more humble leader. He sometimes spoke at conferences on business ethics, sharing his own story as an example of how it is possible to recover from serious mistakes. Sarah taught me that family is about forgiveness, and that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover our true value. Years later, when I finally retired and passed control of the company to the next generation, I felt I had fulfilled the mission Grandpa Harold had given me. I had protected the company, cared for the family, and built a legacy based on solid values. The last thing I did as CEO was write a letter to my successor, following the tradition Grandpa Harold had started. In the letter, I told the whole story about heritage, family, forgiveness, and purpose. I ended with the words Grandpa Harold once told me. "Remember that true inheritance lies not in what we receive, but in what we do with what we receive. Take care of your family, protect the company's values, and never forget that true success is measured not by what we accumulate, but by the positive impact we make on people's lives." Today, when I look back, I see that terrible conversation with Bradley at the restaurant was actually the beginning of my true journey. He had said that I was never truly part of the family, but he was wrong. I wasn't just part of the family, I had become the guardian of its most important values. And when I think of Grandpa Harold, I know he would be proud, not only of the company's financial success, but of the fact that I managed to transform a situation of conflict and betrayal into a story of forgiveness and redemption. The Greenwich Mansion remains the heart of the Whitmore family. Amy and her children come for Sunday dinner, Bradley and his family join in the important celebrations, and my mother continues to tell stories about Grandpa Harold to the new generations. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the mansion's library, I swear I feel Grandpa Harold's presence. It's as if he's there, smiling proudly and whispering, "Well done, my dear granddaughter. Well done." And that's how I choose to end this story. Not with bitterness about the betrayals I suffered, but with gratitude for the journey that brought me here. Bradley tried to tear me away from the family, but he ultimately showed me that family is something we build every day through our choices and actions. Grandpa Harold gave me so much more than money or property. He gave me the chance to discover who I truly was and what I was capable of. And for that, I will be forever grateful. After all, as he always said, "Sarah, my dear, family isn't about blood. It's about love, loyalty, and choices, and you will always be my family, no matter what." He was right, and I hope this story inspires others to understand that sometimes life's greatest gifts come disguised as challenges, and that the true legacy lies not in what we receive, but in what we do with what we receive. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Leave your opinion in the comments. I'll be here, and until next time.